Hi, I'm Marcia Lehman and I'm a Knox County Master Gardener. Today I'll be working on renovating a bed of strawberries which finished producing in June, and I'll show you as we go through the video what needs to be done to renovate strawberries. This is an annual task. It is best done about a week after the final harvest. But as many of you have probably encountered, by the time the strawberries finish their harvest in early to mid-June, everything else in the garden is cranking up, picking up speed, and your attention turns to those, and we tend to forget about the strawberry plants. So if in fact you get to them about a week after they finish harvesting, it is as simple as cutting everything back to about 2 inches above ground. If you are growing in a field and you have a row, you could simply set your lawnmower at about 2.5 inch height and mow down the row, assuming you don't have drip irrigation in there that you need to worry about. But here, these are actually in a bed that is made of 2x8. So the bed size is 8 inches high, but you can barely see it because we have so much vegetation growing out over the top. So if you're like most of us, you don't get that done in that first window of opportunity, that is 1 week after harvest, which is when the task is simpler. Here we are, it's now 6 to 8 weeks, and this is when if you haven't gotten it done by now, it definitely needs to be done, which is why I'm here today. The tools that I'll be using include a hedge trimmer to remove a lot of growth, a soil knife where I need to remove old plants, and pruners to do some cleanup. And I will be wearing gloves, and all my tools have already been sanitized. So let's get started. So as I work, I'm going to continue to talk about why we do these things, some of the terminology, and so what I'm going to do, since these are already wanting to climb out of the bed, is I'm going to start by just cleaning up the edge of the bed. Now, that means I'm probably taking off some runners. You've probably heard that term. Runners are what produce daughter plants. So the first plants that go in eventually become mother plants because they produce the runners that then become newer plants. So as I see some of those, I'm going to pull them out and set them over here. But I need to find the edge of the bed. I need to get rid of any brown foliage, but first I just need to be able to see what I'm working with. So I need to find the bed. Now, you see how full this bed is. Like many of our home gardens, we have lots of stories here at Concord too. So the story on these strawberries is that in March of 2020, you remember that's when the COVID lockdown started, the project chair here at Concord Garden got a phone call from Dr. Natalie Baumgartner, who is an associate professor at UT and the statewide coordinator for Master Gardeners. Dr. Baumgartner had been planning to do a trial with strawberry plants and had plants to deliver to folks all across the state. The COVID lockdown came, she couldn't make those deliveries, that trial couldn't be run, and so the phone call was, can you folks at Concord take some of these strawberry plants? So on a Thursday evening, we built these 2 beds. Each one is 4 by 8 feet, so that's 32 square feet. We built the beds on a Thursday evening, got them filled with a blend of composted horse manure and a blend of soil. We have piles of those in inventory at all times. And 2 days later on a Saturday, we planted. Now, when we planted, I wish I had taken photos because, as I mentioned, the bed is 4 feet by 8 feet. That's 32 square feet. And we stuck 32 strawberry plants in each bed. So there was one strawberry plant in the center of each square foot in the garden. And, you know, the plants were little things, you know, like this. And so we had 4 rows of 8, a foot apart in all directions. And a lot of folks looked at them and said, don't you think we should put some more plants in there? And the answer is no. This is the correct spacing. You just wait till next year. So here we are in 2021. We had a great harvest. We have a bed so full that you can't see the soil. And now it's time to renovate it. And we've got to take out anything that's brown, fading, diseased, and we need to thin it. And that's really what we're doing in renovation. And that needs to be done annually. And as I say, if we get to it within a week of the final harvest, it's a much easier task. We didn't get there, so now I have a bigger task today. But when you do the annual renovation, you know, the mother plant sends out runners. Those are called daughter plants. The next year, those become mother plants. So any particular plant is going to bear fruit for 1 to 2 years. Send out runners, make new plants, and if you do regular renovation, you can keep your strawberry bed going for about 8 years. If you don't do regular renovation, then you will run out of steam in about half that time, 3 to 4 years. You'll see your production decline year after year. And after about 4 years, you're getting next to nothing and saying, what's it? Well, it's just not worth it. So if you do the annual renovation, you can make this bed last 8 years. That's why we're doing this. So let me proceed. You don't need to watch me do all this trimming, but let me clear out the edge of the bed so we can actually see what we're working with, and then I'll come back and show you more of the fine tuning that we'll be doing. Okay, so let me just take the camera and show you now that you can see the sides of the raised bed. All I did was take the hedge trimmers and go around and chop off anything that was hanging over the edge. I would also tell you that in the process, I decided I was not going to save any of those runners because there are plenty of additional runners in the bed that I don't need to save any of those that I cut off going over the edge of the bed. But now I can actually see the sides of the bed, and now I will start to work on the interior portion of the bed. Okay, now that I've done the haircut around the sides, the harder part begins. This is the more selective part where I need to come in and find some of the older plants that are showing age and disease, and if I can pull them out, I will. That one came fairly easily, but they're so entangled that I may end up having to cut them out. But I'm not going to thin this down to be as skinny as it was at the time of planting in March 2020, because those were small plants that had been probably in cold storage over the winter. So, but I do need to get in here and clean out, find the mother plants, which are the older ones, and that are showing some sign of brown leaves, disease, or just age. And in this case, yep, I used my soil knife to dig that one up. Sometimes you can pull them out, sometimes you really need to just clip them really low. Now, if you've planted strawberries, you know that you don't plant them deeply. You want the crown sitting right at the soil level, and that's why setting the height when you mow them at about 2 inches so that you don't nick the crown is important. But in this case, we're not going after, I'm not trying to cut out the crown, I'm trying to remove the whole plant. And I'm focused on the ones that have discoloration in the leaves. And as you follow them back down to the base, you'll find that they are the older plants. And this is why it needs to be done annually, because you can get such a matted bed in 1 year's time. So I'm just going to continue focus on the ones that have brown leaves, that are bigger, definitely older, and it would be nice if I could kind of get back to 4 nice rows. They're not going to be, again, as sparse looking as when we initially planted, but if I can create kind of 4 individual little rows, I'm going to feel really good about what I've done. So let me continue working here, taking out brown leaves, old leaves, thinning, and I won't make you watch all that. I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. But again, I'm focused on leaves that have discoloration, disease, a darker color because they're older. You can see the lighter color on some of the daughter plants. So I'm focused on removing older plants, keeping the younger plants because they will produce better next year. The other thing that's important about getting this done now, this is the first week in August, so I'm really at the end of the window of opportunity to do this, is that the fruit buds for next spring's harvest will be set starting in the second half of August and into early September. That's why it's important to get this done now, because next year's crop is determined by the health and condition of these plants this late summer, early fall. It's also why when you read the handout, after you do this, you want to give them a shot of a complete fertilizer. That means it has some nitrogen, some phosphorus, and some potassium, no zeros. And you want to keep watering them. Don't let them get dried out. As I mentioned, this bed has drip irrigation, and as I get down to the soil, I will be assessing whether or not they're getting enough water. Now, as I take more plants out, I won't need as much water in the bed, so I will have to watch these over the next week or so once I get them thinned out. But let me get back to work, and I'll be back when I have more of a finished result to show you. So let me show you what I have. I've made one pass around the bed. You know, the first time we just clipped everything hanging over the edge. This time I pulled any plants and their crowns that were within 4 inches of the edge side of the bed, because they're just going to continue to grow and spill out over the bed. So I have cleaned out the entire perimeter of the bed and have about a half a can of trash so far. So here's the finished. I was not able, despite trying, I started out trying to make 4 rows. I've ended up with 3 rows, a narrow row on each side along the edge of the bed, and a wider row in the middle. And you know, you've seen me in the videos, I'm short, so reaching way into the middle of a 4-foot wide bed is a good reminder of why we don't make raised beds any wider than 4 feet. But in this case, I was not able, without stepping in the bed, and that's #1 no-no, never do that. So I left the middle swath a tad wider than the 2 outer swaths. And frankly, by next spring, they will have grown back together again. In the end, I kind of used my hands like a comb and would start at the bottom and pull up anything lying on the ground, debris. Here's a nice shot. You can see my 3 rows. But I have ended up with 3 somewhat distinctive rows, and they will fill in with additional runners. And next year, this will be very matted. And having done this in early August, I am quite positive that I will put it on my calendar to make sure that this task gets done within that 1-week window after the last harvest next spring, because I really don't want to do this again, and you probably don't want to either. But the best way to train yourself is to have this experience once, say never again, and then you too will renovate your strawberry beds about a week after your final harvest. So out of this 4x8 bed that started with 32 spindly little plants 15 months ago, we got quite a good harvest this spring. We have lots of plants in here. I'm sure there are still more than 32 plants in here, and next year we'll do a better renovation by doing it earlier in the cycle. So it's now been thinned out, old plants removed. In the process, did determine that these plants need a bit more water, so the irrigation cycle has been increased. And in the next day or so, they will get, once they've had a little bit more water, they will also get a dose of fertilizer. And then we'll go to work on the second bed. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you learned something. I hope you go out and work in your strawberry beds. It's not too late, but the window of opportunity is closing. And if you're like me, next year, you'll do it a week after harvest so that you can do the much simpler process of just cutting them back to about 2 inches above ground, which is a much simpler process.